Open your cerebral cortex and shift your lobes into upper beta phase, because you are going to have Bitcoin knowledge transmitted directly into your vestibulocochlear. Your host of Bitcoin Knowledge is Trace Mayer, an early Bitcoin advocate since it cost $0.25, but this is not intended to be investment advice. A doctor of jurisprudence, but this is definitely not legal advice. And an investor in core cryptocurrency infrastructure, including Armory, BitPay, Kraken, and Mitagio, but this is not a recommendation of those services. Here, you get fed via direct mind download with pure and free Bitcoin knowledge.
Well, this is Trace Mayer from the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast, and I have with me Chris Coney of the Cryptoverse Podcast, and he also runs Cryptoversity. And today we're going to be talking about Steem. So welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Thank you, Trace. Wonderful to be here.
So first, let's start. What is Steem? I'm actually pretty much a complete noob when it comes to Steem, so maybe you could explain this a little bit better to the audience.
Okay, sure, no problem. So the first thing to know is it's spelled S-T-E-E-M. The first time I searched for it, I thought it was Steem, the gaming network. So make sure it's Steem with two E's. And the website is steemit.com, which is kind of a play on Reddit. So Steem is a social network. It's got a real-world use case, unlike a lot of crypto projects. And the unique thing about Steemit is that it pays its users to use it. So if you post something or comment, other people vote for it, and then you can earn some crypto tokens in exchange for that.
Yeah, so this is fascinating. I first kind of learned about it by Jeff Berwick. I had sent Jeff Berwick his first Bitcoins, and I guess he decided to turn around and pay back the favor he told me about Steem. And I was actually traveling, so I wasn't even able to tinker around with it. And I made my first Steem post, and it generated $5,000 of revenue. Mm-hmm. And Berwick, he's generated something like $50,000 of revenue. Just in 2 weeks. Right. Now, how when we're dealing with Steem, I just finished reading the white paper. It's about 44 pages long, and we have these different tokens. It's blockchain based. We have these different tokens. We have Steem dollars, we have Steem, the actual currency, and then we have something called Steem power. Maybe you can explain a little bit about what are these different tokens, and they actually have value now. I think the Steem itself has $175 million market cap, so it's acquired value. We all know it's subjective value theory, but maybe you can go in a little bit about what are the differences of these different tokens, what are they used for, etc.
Absolutely, it's one of the most popular questions. So really, there's only two tokens in there. There's the Steem-backed dollars, which is a derivative that emerges, the value that emerges out of a underlying packet of Steem tokens. So Steem is Dan calls it liquid Steem. So there's tradable Steem that is literally just the Steem token that is the native token on the blockchain. And then Steem power, that's just what we call Steem that has been locked away in order to give someone greater voting power. So that's if you want to have greater influence on the network, you take your Steem, you invest it or vest it, lock it away, it becomes Steem power, which is then voting power on the network. So that's the general difference between the three things.
Yeah, so we've got Steem the token, which is your native unit on the blockchain.
That's right.
Then we split it up into two different kind of derivatives of that, right? We've got the Steem power and the Steem dollar. And from the white paper, from what I understand, the Steem dollars pretty much they're pegged to the value of a US dollar, and it's going to it usually will fluctuate at most only between 99 cents and $1.01 cent. And then there's actually market makers, and I found it fascinating. The blockchain, neither the blockchain nor these market makers get any advantage on arbitraging the price because it uses a 7-day moving average in order to determine it in terms of using it as an oracle. So that gives us, and you can only have basically 5%. The Steem dollar acts like a convertible debt instrument, and so you don't want to over leverage the underlying blockchain or platform, and so only about 5% debt to equity, right?
Right, exactly.
And this is all like blockchain enforced, which I found like also to be fascinating. I mean, I'd actually like to see how they solve this problem, like from a technical standpoint, because like I said, I'm just a noob on the whole thing, but like it's very, very fascinating. So that gives us like this stable, in terms of like price value token, which then people actually get paid out. So like when I wrote my introductory post, I earned like $5,000, right? So I'm going to get half of it paid in Steem dollars, and the other half gets paid in Steem Power.
Right.
Now, with the Steem Power, I found this to be fascinating also, because like you said, it gets locked up for 104 weeks, and then it gets equally unlocked on a weekly basis. And what this does is it incentivizes like a long-term investment of capital, or in other words, people holding Steem, that it gets unlocked over this 2-year period. And so then they have a financial incentive to want to make their Steem become worth more, right?
Right, exactly.
And now, how do they actually... Oh, and then you can also buy Steem, the native token, and send it and turn it into Steem Power, but and you convert that instantaneously, but you can't unconvert it instantaneously. It always is going to take this 104-week period, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of the old 5-year savings accounts that well, I think some people do still use those, but you agree with the bank. If you lock your savings away for 5 years, they'll give you a greater interest rate. So it's similar to that.
Yeah, or you, like I recently just, one of my investments, my shares were locked up for a year because we had an IPO, right? And that's very common. So like I really kind of see these Steem Power tokens are functioning more like locked up shares than necessarily like a CD, I guess, or even a bond.
True.
But what I find absolutely fascinating with this is the function that the Steem Power actually plays, because and I've talked about this extensively, this problem that we've got when it comes to like just the sheer amount of information that we're bombarded with in the information age. Like, how do we figure out what information we should pay attention to, who we should actually listen to, like what we should read? Like, how do we figure all this stuff out? I mean, do we listen to CNN or the New York Times? I mean, just watching how the New York Times has covered Donald Trump, it's just been abysmal. And then we have Operation Mockingbird, where the CIA like installed editors at all the major newspapers. So like the news has been totally corrupted to push a particular agenda for like 50 years. So. And then we got, new gatekeepers like Facebook, who've been censoring conservative stuff in the newsfeed and everything. And then Google, who's been tinkering around with the search results, being pro-Hillary, anti-Trump in the search results. So now we can't even trust like the tech giants when it comes to like the filter bubble that we all live in. I mean, if people haven't watched the Filter Bubble TED Talk, like I'd highly recommend watching that, because like we all live in this filter bubble. And at the end of the day, like what everybody's fighting over is attention, right? Like maybe you could go into that a little bit. Like what really is the value of attention, and like how it plays as a scarce resource in the information age.
Absolutely. So this is one of the key questions people have about a new crypto project is, well, how does a crypto token suddenly acquire economic value? Well, Steem Power in particular derives its value from the fact that it increases the chance of you getting someone's attention. So the greater amount of Steem Power you have, the more weight your vote has, and the more power you have to increase the visibility of a given post or a given comment. So the question is, who wants people's attention? Well, there's lots of people. Anyone with a business or a mission. Charities have humanitarian missions. They need other people to be involved in them. They need their bodies or their dollars or whatever. So if you have a mission, whether it's in business or not, you need people's attention. You need to recruit people to back the cause. So beyond Steem it, that's why I think attention is a key value that can now be sort of monetized in a way, and not bought, but there's definitely influence over that, and there's a decentralized way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a book called The Woofy Factor that talks about like social influence. Both Mises and Rothbard talked extensively about the role that advertising plays for the entrepreneur. I mean, it's really the oldest profession because you had to advertise the really oldest profession, right?
Yes, indeed.
I mean, animals have been advertising for a long time.
Yes.
So when we're talking about like this explosion of demand for attention, and the ability to influence it, I mean, what actually, like, how is this actually happening with Steem? I mean, and I guess before we get to that, YouTube has recently introduced a metric where they look at the number of hours or the number of days or even years that certain videos get played, and then that like actually gets turned into a measurement of quality for the search engines and stuff like that. I mean, like, how is Steem attempting to solve this problem, like this problem of attention?
Yes, indeed. So you were talking about YouTube. So like when the content started to move away from web pages, which can be broken down by an algorithm and analyzed with text and semantics, well, we don't yet have technology sophisticated enough to fully understand the content of a video. So it's like, what metrics do we use? Initially, it was purely views, but that's not really a good measure of the quality of the content. So then, like you say, engagement becomes one of the key metrics. How far through the video do people watch? Where do they jump out? What's the total percentage of the video they consume? And that's the info they're going to use to decide where to rank a given video. Now, the difference with Steem, because you think like that's a computer system. So that's an objective measurement that doesn't require any human brain or consciousness to determine what is, quote, valuable. The key difference I see with Steemit is it's people with subjective value systems deciding what's valuable and what's valuable or what they believe is valuable to their peers.
Yeah.
You follow me on that?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we've seen this with PageRank, right? So Google is one of the largest companies in the world, and it invented this whole new asset class of PageRank or link juice, because when you're looking at and the Steemit guys, they talk about this in the white paper, how it's the contextualization of all the links between the content that actually adds a bunch of value to the content itself, because then you're able to like know and understand what's happening. So what we're looking at happening with Steem is that we could potentially see it disrupt like Google even. Because like Steem is creating this whole new asset class of Steem, the native token that then has an economic value that gets paid out based on how people curate and how people create and post new content, right? Those are the two primary ways that people actually earn Steem. So maybe you could go a little bit more in depth into how do people actually like post content and get paid, and also how do people curate content and get paid?
Okay, two good questions. Let's go with posting your own content to begin with. So when you go to Steemit, it kind of works like WordPress.com. You can host your blog on Steemit, and it's a free to sign up, and you can post as many articles as you wish. Of course, there's a tagging system, and you can write your content in such a way that will get indexed by search engines. But earlier on, you were talking about Jeff, the Dollar Vigilante, and you might think, whoa, how come he's suddenly got like 15 grand for his first ever post?
Exactly. Well, it's like, where in the world did this money come from? Because my buddy Tone Vey is like, Tone's like, oh, you got to stay away from Steemit, like it's a Ponzi scam. And I'm like, well, usually like Ponzi scams, money flows in, but it doesn't flow out. But in this case, like money's flowing out. So, exactly. I mean, it's very confusing.
Very confusing. That would be to say that like an app game that gives you virtual tokens as rewards is a Ponzi scheme.
It's like
you never put anything in there.
Catch your Charizards on Pokemon or something, right?
Exactly. I think that's a Ponzi scheme. What are you going to do? Even if it folds, you're still whole legally.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like I'm immediately going to try and trade some of my Steem dollars or whatever they are into Bitcoin, because I actually disagreed with the Steem white paper a little bit, because I think that the Bitcoin proof of work does actually provide a value, and and like the way that Steem like does its proof of stake, I do think it'll be successful. But I still kind of like the proof of work aspect of Bitcoin in terms of the security it provides. But I mean, those are tiny details that I don't actually think like pose systemic threats to the blockchain itself.
Well, Steem does use proof of work as well. It's a combined delegated proof of stake and proof of work.
Yeah, I was a little confused when I was reading that section of the white paper, actually.
I haven't fully got my head around it yet.
Yeah, how exactly it functions. And I haven't gone and looked at the code or anything. I mean, I'm going to wait till it actually pays out money before I invest any more attention into figuring out how this thing works.
Well, here's a little tip. Like, there's a site called steemle.com. It's steemle.com. And this is just this is tapped into the Steem API and draws all these graphs and stuff. And it shows like today, there's been 1,368 proof of works. So I think with Steemit, don't quote me on this, but 10 blocks, one of them is proof of worked and all the other ones are proof of staked.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, there are a bunch of these really helpful sites. Like there's steemd.com and then also steemstats.com,
exactly.
Which I found kind of helpful because like, with Steem Stats, you're able to do it's kind of like blockchain.info in terms of being a block explorer, but then at the same time you're able to see like how much Steem dollars you actually get for upvoting like Jeff Berwick or Charlie Shrimp's post. And then you earn money like when you actually upvote a particular comment in the comment section, and then the good comments that are getting these upvotes by people who have more reputation or less reputation or whatever, those comments rise to the top, and then from the white paper you actually get paid like 6 levels deep on comments, like in the comments section. So the whole way it sets all of these incentives to guide user behavior, I think it's awesome because, I mean, if there's anything that we've learned from like Facebook or Reddit or even Twitter, I mean, Twitter recently banned like Milo because they didn't like the way he was like talking about Donald Trump or whatever. Like, I mean, seriously, we're going to have political censorship on these, what you could consider like utilities. And Reddit, like, and don't even get into like vote brigades, right? Because like the whole way that the metric system is set up and the incentives, I mean, what gets measured gets done. Like people behave in the way in which they're measured and the incentives that are set up. And so with Steem, I just find it fascinating how the incentives are set up to guide like a lot of this user behavior that seems to be providing at the end of the day a better like curation of the content out there. It's acting as a better gatekeeper, and it's also acting as a neutral gatekeeper in terms of it's not censoring conservative versus liberal or big block versus small block or like whatever it is. It's in a way you could say it's moderating with the old-fashioned way, which is money.
Exactly. I was going to say something about the earnings for curation. So we did creation.
Yeah.
Post, so you create.
So posts Jeff, like Jeff or me, we put out a post and we earn all this money because people like upvoted it. But like, how does this curation work? Because I really like how it pulls everybody in to becoming stakeholders.
That's correct. Yeah. And so check it out. So if you go straight to the Steem homepage, you'll see all the trending posts. It doesn't really pay just to go and support the stuff that has already exploded in popularity. That doesn't really add any value to the network. So what the network wants you to do is to help to basically pan for gold. So where I hang out is in the news section, and I look at the most recent posts. Because if you're the first person to signal to the blockchain that this is good content, and the way you do that is by clicking the upvote button,
having reputation. And Steem power.
Well, not necessarily. You could just do it purely as a new user. You could just find a new post, be the first person to upvote that. If that post then goes viral, because you were the first to identify that as a good post, you get rewarded quite well for that.
Huh. Okay, but it also depends on your Steem power and your reputation to give it more prominence,
so
right?
There's an aggregate of how much weight is behind your punch. Well, one of the things is how much Steem power you have, your reputation, but also that other factor, which doesn't mean that you have to have any power at all. You can just use your labor, use your wits, and you can still earn good money.
So you don't. Because with any these cryptocurrencies, you can either buy it or you can earn it, right?
Yeah.
And so this is like the way people are able to earn it.
Exactly.
And then, I mean, we're also talking about the ability to have network effects. You know, the first person that discovers the really good piece of content, they're going to get paid more, but also like how much that person who created that content makes, it's based on like a quadratic formula with n squared as opposed to just n in terms of votes, right? So like the more widely people vote in favor of it, the more that post is actually going to make.
Correct. Yeah.
Is that kind of a correct way of looking at it?
That's a pretty good way of looking at it, yeah.
Now, how does this, like when we're dealing with Google or YouTube or whatever, we've got a bunch, I mean, they're on a perennial like crusade, jihad against like non-natural metrics, you know, black hat or gray hat, like people buying links or like whatever it is. Like it's a continual game of cat and mouse.
Yes.
What are they actually trying to accomplish when they're doing that?
That's a good question. It's a very good question. What they're trying to accomplish in that regard is, and I'll have to just give you my opinion on this, is that obviously they want their algorithm to be uninterrupted, and they don't want anyone to try and find a loophole in the law of the land, if you like. So in Google world, the law is the code that runs the algorithm. And they don't want anyone,
is all black boxed.
Of course.
I mean, it's not open source.
Good point,
I mean, we have no idea we have no idea what this formula is. And to their credit, if we did, then it'd be a lot easier to game, right? Exactly. But then perhaps, just like all the open source crypto projects, people, hobbyists, hackers, whoever, would suggest new additions on GitHub of how to create an incentive model that would disincentivize the dishonest behavior, like Steem it. Spamming just doesn't pay because your voting power decays over time. So there's no point in spamming. It just doesn't, there's no economic incentive to do so. Yeah, so I mean, how's this impact stuff like botnets and like black hat SEO and voting bots and voting brigades? Like, I mean, all this stuff. Like, when we're dealing with Steem, I mean, the white paper, it talks about how they've tried to just preempt all of this bad behavior and just make it so that it's not economically profitable to even engage in it.
Right, exactly. But like you just said, there is a possibility of collusion amongst the real heavy hitters. I'm not quite sure how you would solve that. Say if you got the 5 biggest whales on Steemit who all met in a coffee shop somewhere and decided to collude and upvote and downvote posts that they liked the content of or didn't like the content of, say because of their joint political opinion. I'm not sure how the blockchain would, how you could code around that. I'm honestly not sure how you would do that.
Yeah, but I mean, even if you take like the top 5 biggest whales, as it talks about in the white paper, like even the next top 20 are going to have more combined wealth than those top 5 whales, most likely.
Yes,
and more Steem power and everything. So, I mean, is it really going to be that much different than what we have today with Operation Mockingbird, where we have CNN, Fox, ABC, NBC, but at the end of the day, they're all being controlled behind the scenes by CIA in terms of what they can run and the agenda and stuff that they have to follow. And MI6, I mean, all of the press is pretty much completely corrupted in that sense. We don't really have true investigative journalism anymore.
I agree.
And yet, Steem could give a financial incentive that's blockchain enforced and protects the journalists themselves for performing these types of work, right? I mean, like,
like a decentralized WikiLeaks.
Yeah, decentralized WikiLeaks, where WikiLeaks is actually getting money, because I mean that was one of the big problems, was the banking blockade, right?
Absolutely.
Where WikiLeaks, their donations were completely shut off extra legally without any court orders or anything like that. Like, boom, you can't process any credit card payment, donations, or wire transfers.
Right.
So now, like, the payment system being wielded for political ends has really kind of stirred up a hornet's nest with a lot of the hacktivists, you could say, right?
Yes, absolutely.
How do you?
What you were saying?
Oh yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a key point there. What the fundamental point I was hearing you make there was the media is still based on a hierarchical system, and that's how they get away with that behavior. So with Steem being a network structure, and it allows direct access to the source, and everyone has equal access to the source, i.e. the network itself, that's where the freedom and the liberty comes from. It's not so much Steam has reinvented the wheel. It's that they've adopted a more sound structure, which is a network model versus a hierarchical model.
Yeah, a network model that's equal to one and all. Right. Kind of like gold. Gold doesn't care. Gold doesn't care if you're the worst guy in the world or the best guy in the world. Like right. Gold serves its master equally well.
That's not its job, is it? It's not a moral compass.
Gold is not a moral arbitrator. Right. And yet that's what anti-money laundering laws and know your customer, know your client, like all this stuff is attempting to introduce moral arbitration into the actual unit of account that people are using for trade. But who's to say who the correct moral arbitrator is?
That's a very good question.
Which Steem takes a hands-off approach just like gold does. In that sense, it's just
the way that answers the question is it says, well, not one single individual is the way it answers that question. Definitely not one single individual, even a small group, because that's just unfair. It's not representative.
So, like freedom of speech, like Steem really means it, right?
Well, that's the funny thing that Milo was protesting about is that Twitter supposedly prides itself on freedom of speech. It's like, excuse me.
Yeah, except when you say something we don't like.
You know what I mean? It's crazy. And then earlier on, you were talking about Google colluding. I heard, I think it was yesterday, I was watching, I can't remember who it was, one of the crypto elite was saying about how Eric Schmidt takes a meeting at the White House once a week. I was like, what?
Well, the ideas can only be overcome by other ideas. You got to be able to manage perceptions. And when things aren't going well, you have to lie. That's what one of the European central bankers talked about. So, the information war that's being waged on everybody with filter bubbles and censorship and vote brigades. And that's not even talking about all the shadow censorship that goes on. Take drone strikes, for example. Like your tweet will go out, but it doesn't get shown to all your followers. And so you just think that, that particular idea virus isn't contagious and doesn't really spread. But at the end of the day, it's because it's got this massive headwind against it, and you don't even know the headwind's there.
Yes, I believe that's why new social networks succeed, because when Twitter began, you saw everything. And then as filtering started to happen, like Instagram pops up with no filtering, everyone moves there. Then that starts to happen. Then everyone moves to Snapchat because they're purist when they first launch. And then when they become profit centers, that's when it goes wrong.
Or when they take their investment from Incutel, right?
Oh, yes, exactly. Well, it's special interests.
I mean, why the whole VC model? Of course, the power centers have to get into the VCs in order to kind of act as a choke point on the new technology, deciding who wins and who loses. I mean, yeah, one of the reasons Facebook got access to the capital that they got access to was because they were willing to play ball and be the Stasi for everybody.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very interesting how how the VC community is really just like a puppeteer for the intelligence services and agencies, and yet these new blockchain networks like Steemit, I mean, it's going to disintermediate the VCs.
Yes. Couldn't it? Because you could crowdfund something on Steemit.
Yeah, you can crowdfund something, anything. I mean, oh man, it's just fascinating. I being a big freedom of speech proponent, I don't think we should lock up Galileo. I like the contributions of Copernicus and Isaac Newton, and I think that having a vigorous debate is important for the spread of ideas. I
agree.
And yes, with that comes cat pictures and everything else. I mean, we invented the Gutenberg press. It took 10 years after that, came the romance novel, and it took 150 years to get the scientific journal. But eventually we got the scientific journal, which introduced a whole new way of arguing and getting consensus when it came to the spread of these ideas, and it led to the scientific revolution. With things like Steemit and the information age, I think we're going to see another revolution coming just in how we go about curating and arguing information. Because like YouTube comments and Reddit comments, they're just not cutting it. They're just not adding value. There are too many trolls, and in a lot of cases, these trolls are actually paid by the Department of Defense or MI6 or these other institutions or organizations that are running disinformation campaigns.
Yes, I read an article from some ex-Secret Service guy about the mindset of warfare and how you would strategize, what his strategy would be to take down a site based on creating multiple accounts, designing multiple personas, and basically arguing with yourself, but with humans involved. So one of them would play the Joker, one of them would play the diplomat, and you control all the accounts, basically provoking people, then siding with some people with one account and then another. And he broke the whole thing down, and I was like, wow, there's actual strategies to this stuff.
Well, I mean, the Department of Defense, they were actively doing this, and Hillary Clinton just allocated $1 million in her campaign for online strategy or something like that. So, I mean, she's now hiring a bunch of probably Bernie supporters to be trolls, right? Because they're good at it. I mean, it is absolutely fascinating because Steem it can just change these economic incentives and just weed out all of this trash content.
Yep, because you can downvote stuff, and the heavy hitters can also
upvote stuff, downvote. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you can affect other people's income.
And then people begin to trust. People are more clearly able to curate their own news based on the people that they themselves trust, as opposed to having their content curated for them.
With confidence that it will not be censored.
Yeah, because they're dealing with a blockchain
it cannot be censored.
That acts equal to one and all.
Yeah, and it's fully transparent. You can check that all the transactions are going through. And if Steemit.com, the front end, decided to start censoring stuff, it's just a 2-hour job for someone to build a duplicate of Steemit.com, connect to the same blockchain, and pull all of the transparent information out of the database, and away we go.
Yeah, the U.S. Supreme Court, when they're dealing with some of these freedom of speech cases, like one of the cases, the answer to bad speech is more speech. And sunlight is the best disinfectant, which is one of the best quotes from one of the U.S. Supreme Court cases. And I think that's what we're seeing is this transparency is sunlight, and it's going to disinfect just all this like garbage and soot and silt and bacteria and other trash that we have in the current news and journalism and information ecosystem.
I agree with that. You were talking about the filter bubble, which to me is like, if perception is reality, then if these systems, the social networks, the YouTubes of the world, can control what reaches our senses, that will be perceived as reality, even though it's actually a very tightly controlled narrative, which people do not realize. Like you say, behind the scenes, people don't realize the manipulation of the algorithms is happening. They just assume. The average person goes on Twitter, goes on YouTube, and it's some benign algorithm that's fairly representing your viewing history without any bias whatsoever, which actually is not true.
Yeah, well, once you've seen, you can't unsee, right? And truth will cleave its own way. It just has a way of doing that. Anyways, we've kind of rambled a little bit too long. It's just been a fascinating discussion about this new innovation with Steem. I've been Trace Mayer for Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast. We've had Chris Coney from the Cryptoverse Podcast discussing Steem It. Thanks so much for being with us, Chris.
Thank you very much, mate.
Be sure to get a copy of the free Bitcoin Guide at freebitcoinguide.com. Got a question or suggestion? Record your voice at bitcoin.kn. Don't be shy. To help the show, share bitcoin.kn with friends, post about it on Reddit, and otherwise spam the interwebs. Your iTunes comments and 5-star reviews are very important to us. Please continue tuning in to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast, where we release interviews with the top people in the Bitcoin world. Now take some choline and let that Bitcoin knowledge consolidate.